Welcome back to Beyond the Desk with Chad and Amy. And today we're going to be talking about navigating travel insurance.
Hello.
Hey, welcome back.
Welcome back.
How are you?
I'm good.
So we had our Thanksgiving break.
We did. It was wonderful.
We broke down all the equipment to clear the table for the family coming over.
Yeah.
And we reset everything up today. And I think we're doing awesome. We did a couple tests and everything sounds great.
I mean, 13 minutes in is really good.
Really good. Okay, so we have something else we're talking about today, right?
Right. We are talking about travel insurance today, babe. We are talking about the basics, long-term stay. So if people are staying longer than 3 months even, right? And then we're also going to talk about digital nomad travel insurance and maybe how, that could affect a lot of different people. After the pandemic, there was a massive rise in people just working remotely, 100%, and being able, their goal was to be able to travel the world and work and bring in money.
Right. And I think we know kind of what we chalk up to.
Yeah.
But we'll share what we did for our exploratory trip, what type of package we did for that as well. So as far as travel insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what travel insurance covers, because the word insurance, at least in the US, is a very broad term, right? Because you have dental insurance and health insurance and auto insurance and travel insurance and
rental and all
everything is insurance. And realistically, what insurance breaks down to be is you invest a small amount, they take a risk that you won't need it, but in the event that they do, they cover the costs based off of the policy.
Yeah,
right?
And it's really overlooked. Most people don't consider travel insurance important.
So every time I book a flight, it always says you want to have travel insurance, and depending upon where we're going and the scenario, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Same.
And for this trip, I intentionally didn't through our with our flight, with our carrier,
right?
Because I knew I was going to do a third party, because I knew that there were going to be unique circumstances for us that just going to Florida are not as big of a deal.
Sure.
Right. So one of the things that we had to take into consideration is that we have multiple stops.
3.
Right. And when there's multiple stops, the likelihood of missing your next flight increases, right? Whether it's something you do because you were sitting down eating and lost track of time,
right,
or whether it's something that happens where your flight is 45 minutes late and you can't make it to your next gate.
Yeah.
Right. So
be careful when you book your flights to give yourself enough time to go through customs, which I would do a minimum of a 2-hour layover. Minimum.
So that's the interesting thing when you travel is 45 minutes seems like a lot, but planes board 30 to 35 minutes before departure, which means you've already lost about a half hour of that 45 minutes. So really you have between 10 and 15 minutes to get to your gates.
Well, that's not even including
border control, not including any of that.
And then you don't know where your gate, where you're getting on at, concourse. Could be completely different concourse. Yeah.
So I like 2+ hours.
Exactly.
In the long run, it sucks traveling for 12 straight hours, but to make it to your destination without any hiccups or issues.
You might want some food. Some people don't fly well, so they might want a drink or two before they hop on an adult beverage. Right. So you just never know. So I really, you and I both, we like to get there a lot earlier. And if we do get there, we've always got work we can be doing. So we'll hop on the laptop and work, while we're waiting. So it just makes things a lot easier to be more prepared, which travel insurance is also a part of that. Being
brings
prepared.
Up an interesting point that I didn't think about till just now. We almost exclusively fly Delta.
Yeah.
So I think there's something we take for granted that a lot of folks who may not fly Delta, they may choose a more budget-friendly airline, may not have access to. And that is, while you're waiting for your flight, access to power, readily available.
Readily available.
Because I remember back in the day when cell phones first came out, people were just huddled around the corner of the charger,
One charger.
right? Because
Yeah.
airports weren't made with that kind of power because
Right.
we just didn't consume electricity
Now
like
they're
that.
everywhere
Now they're everywhere.
with co-working spaces.
So a lot of airports are upgrading and giving you that access, but once you get international, that may not be the
Case.
may not be the case. And the same thing with your flight. Our airplanes have power outlets in them as well, but once you switch to a different carrier or a partner carrier,
Right.
that may not be the case. So you definitely want to take advantage of charging your stuff up. But if you are flying on a budget flight or something where that might not be the option, you want to make sure your stuff is charged up too.
Delta also has, you can charge your phone or your laptop right there in your seat.
Right.
Where some carriers don't have that option either.
Right.
I think they're getting with it nowadays, but you never know.
But it's expensive to upgrade all that.
It is expensive, and just really, work to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah.
And if you don't fly out of the country very often, which we don't either, but you have flown, well, we both have, but you like even into Europe. So you kind of have a better idea of the layover process and the longer layovers and the longer flight times. And we're flying to Atlanta, right? Atlanta to Bogota and then to Medellin.
Yep.
And so we don't know what it's going to be like in Bogota because we've never been there.
My Barcelona trip was 24 straight hours of traveling. From the time I woke up to when I landed final was 24 hours.
Did you ride coach?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That would have been tough.
It's a great learning experience.
Yeah. Somebody flipped me an Ambien.
I tried that. Didn't work.
Oh.
My brain wouldn't allow me to just relax and go to sleep. So once I landed, there was a little tour bus that I just passed out on. Anyways, okay, so but I made it. I made it there.
The investment, right? You made it, and then you went down the coast down the Mediterranean, down
Barcelona,
into
all the way down
into Portugal.
Yeah.
How fun!
And then flew from Portugal back up to Barcelona home to Toronto, and then home.
So we're going to do that eventually.
Yeah.
But today we are talking about investing in travel insurance and what does it mean? What does it include? Most people think it's just for lost luggage or possibly, a missed flight or something like that. But it really does cover or can cover way more than that. And who do you go to? Right? How do you know who's a trusted source? And it really depends on your specific needs, which we'll get into that in a little bit later. But what happens if you fall sick, right? What happened? Like, I know that I personally have chosen to get the yellow fever vaccine before, not for our week trip there, but if we end up going to Colombia for 4 or 5 months, I have chosen to get that vaccine. But what if I didn't, right? What if I fell sick while we were there? And I don't think yellow fever is something you want to mess around with. Where would I go? Would it be covered? I have to pay cash because still in Colombia, cash is king. So, what if things like that happen? What if, let me just knock on someone here really quick. You fall, right? You just don't know what can happen.
Urgent care or emergency room. And is it all out of pocket? Now, granted, some countries, your actual medical expenses will be significantly less.
The States, it
costs almost like $250,000 just to have a hospital visit to give birth to a kid. Like, it is just bonkers what the cost of medical is
here in the
States.
US. Yeah.
And granted, it's going to be significantly less when you go to outside of the US, but do you still want to come out of pocket for that?
No.
Or is investigating into a plan that maybe costs you $150 worth it?
So it's mandatory, first of all, to have medical insurance to enter Colombia. So we have it. But what
medical
we have
coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there is a difference between
travel insurance. It is medical coverage.
Yeah.
It is medical coverage.
Yeah.
But our medical coverage here is not covered there. So we have to purchase travel insurance and make sure that medical piece is a part of that, right? And it covers like luggage and transportation and potentially a rental car. Like, each one is going to be different in what they cover. So whatever it is, if we were renting a car, then we would want to make sure that we have some type of coverage around that. So is the travel insurance that we get Does that cover that? Or do we have to purchase extra at the rental car place? Like, how does that, what does that look like? Doctor's visits, hospital stays, prescriptions, which we know in Colombia, there's a lot of the prescriptions that you have to get a script here for in the States is over the counter there.
Yeah.
And then above all else, like, make sure you keep your receipts. Always keep your receipts for everything so that if you do have a claim, you have what you need in order to file that. So that's just some little basic information, around travel insurance. But what about credit cards? Like we have a Amex that we use, especially when we travel. Amex has travel insurance, right? I know Chase Sapphire, that's supposed to be a good one for travel insurance. What did you see when you took a look at our Amex? What were some of the things that they covered?
So I chose, on when traveling, there's an entire all-encompassing umbrella of insurance, and that's in the event of during your trip, what do you want covered? Right. So in the event that it's snowing and your plane can't take off and you can't leave till the next morning,
Mm-hmm.
normally they will just bump you to the next one or what have you. But if it's the next morning, you need to pay for your hotel and how to get to your hotel and how to get back to the airport. So there's different inclusions within each one.
Different, yeah.
Right. And so for me, when I checked out our American Express options, when it came to cost benefit, I did not find that American Express is going to be our best option for this Colombia trip. A domestic, perfect.
Sure.
But for this trip, one of the biggest things that I wanted to make sure was covered was covering layover issues. If something happens during a layover, what is out of pocket versus what is reimbursable?
And why would you want that to be?
Well,
what happened to us last March?
I just don't have travel issues. Things just go really well.
Yeah.
And we ended up in a really uncontrollable situation that was weather-based, right?
Well, we had a major snowstorm here in Michigan while we were down in New Orleans.
And we were just, hold on for a little bit longer. Let us at least take off, right? And
we were on the plane.
And then they stopped us. I had to pee so badly. We were on the plane, and then we had to
get right back off. Yeah.
And then we had to sit around for a while longer as they pushed it and pushed it and pushed it and finally pushed it to the next morning.
So we had to then...
So we then had to go
get an Uber,
get a hotel,
which was a shady hotel, but it was the only one nearby that,
right.
So... yeah, that was a hot mess. I remember
that was New Orleans, right?
That was New Orleans.
That was domestic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was direct.
It was Delta Direct.
It was direct. So that's one of those situations where it should have just been fine, but things come up that are out of our control. That's the whole point of this is, do you want to get stuck in a third world, and not a third world, I have to stop saying that. Do you want to get stuck in another country?
Yeah. No.
Right, because you just don't. Things are different. Laws are different. Booking a hotel is different. Everything is different, right? So without having that added anxiety of what's this going to cost me? How do I logistically do it? Now you're protected on the financial side for those.
Absolutely,
things.
And cards like MasterCard, they they offer built-in travel benefits, insurance benefits. So like trip cancellation, like we had, right? Activating. And anytime when you purchase, it'll activate automatically. So MasterCard has a really great one built in is another one. So, but interruptions, delays, trip cancellations, I think for you and I, because we had that experience, that is something we're like, yeah, no, we don't want to go through that again. We want to make sure, because we had to pay out of pocket for the hotel and all of that kind of stuff. Ubering, all of it, extra meals. Oh yeah.
So there was one thing I did learn from that experience that I didn't know about travel before. There's a difference between your flight being canceled and delayed. And cancel essentially triggers all of the repercussions of a cancellation, where delay, your seat is reserved, right? So we were upgraded on that one.
First class.
our upgrade was carried over because it was delayed,
Right.
which means we weren't reassigned seats.
That was the first time I ever flew first class, by the way.
Or if it was canceled,
Yeah.
that would have been a whole different scenario. We would have essentially been rebooked, but we would have lost our upgrade at that point.
Right.
But also, if they cancel you, they have things in their terms of service where sometimes they have to pay out a reimbursement because they canceled.
Right.
Or if they delayed, it was actually to our benefit in that situation.
We were delayed for sure.
But you also have to check your insurance policy once you choose one.
Make sure.
Is this cancellation, delays, and the one that we purchased says if it's delayed for a certain number of time or into the next day, then we're protected for all things.
Which is a better one to choose, in our opinion, obviously, because
so they have to delay 6 hours.
We experience
or
that.
if it pushes back to the next day, that is also covered.
Right.
But if they delay 2 hours and we still make that flight, then we're not covered there. But then our next leg, if we're delayed over there because of it, we are covered.
Yeah.
So our current policy, which by the way, for the two of us was like $160, super affordable. It ends up giving us a ton of protection. Any flights, if we have to rebook a flight because we missed our flight or something like that, our protection is up to double our original ticket value. So that means if we buy on site a new ticket and it costs more than what we originally had, it's still covered.
Right.
So you might have bought a flight for $1,200, but when the issue happens, it might be $1,500. You're still out of pocket $300.
Right.
So having that additional coverage piece is also going to be important as well. So think about the whole scope. I guess the whole idea is to give some advice on this. I spent a good amount of time shopping around, and it wasn't just about saving money. It was about getting a tailored plan for our specific needs for that trip.
Right. And, I just had a trip cancellation in New York City. I was supposed to go for A Courageous Voice, which is the nonprofit that I founded. And I was going there with one of our funders. New Jersey is where they're located. Manhattan is where this conference was happening for 3 days. And being a nonprofit, I can't fly Delta, bougie style. We have to go with whatever's cheapest. And so I booked, I think one was through Spirit, the other one coming back was American or something like that. Anyway, my gut, something told me to purchase travel insurance, and I did. Sure enough, our flight, the whole thing was canceled because of the war in Israel.
Right.
Now, this is a Jewish nonprofit organization that's our funder, and so they have a lot of Jewish nonprofits that they fund over in Israel. And so a lot of these nonprofit leaders were coming over here to the States for this conference. And obviously the war broke out, so they had to cancel the whole thing, which is perfect, right? No problem. I mean, that's fine. I get it. But because I had that travel insurance, one of the airlines said, yep, no problem. Here's your refund. The other one, unfortunately, said, doesn't matter what it is. But had I had travel insurance that I had purchased separately, I probably could have been refunded appropriately. Do you see what I'm saying?
Correct. So third party
would have been better.
It's actually a really good way to go. Predominantly because if you buy it directly from, which is still usually issued by a third party, but the underwriting has legal that says excludes from these situations, where third party is going to say it doesn't matter who you're with, you're covered for this situation, period. Right. Where Spirit might say, okay, we're going to partner with you. We're going to offer an insurance option that's budget friendly, but we want these exclusions in there. And some of those might be canceling within 120 days or canceling for non-acts of God or whatever they can write in there.
Yeah.
And the one who gets hurt the most is us, the consumers. So if you go with a third party and attach it to it, then you're covered by situation, not the dictation of what those two negotiated.
Yeah. And as a nonprofit, we can't lose money. That's not something, we're not in the business of losing money. So, but I did lose half of that trip. So should have gone third party. Didn't know that at the time. Who would have thought?
Yeah. This all started with Amex.
That something would have happened.
I looked up Amex. Wasn't something that wasn't right for this trip. Although for a domestic trip, if we were going to Florida or going to New Orleans, might be fine for that.
for domestic
Yeah.
versus
So
out
if
of
you're
the
flying
country.
domestic, check your credit card, see what's included, see what you can purchase as a bolt-on. Sometimes it's just an add-on or an upgrade to what's already in
And
there,
it really could be a benefit for you.
which could be a benefit. You could already, as a member of that credit card, have buy-in to some protections.
You're right.
I know that American Express requires that we purchase our tickets with that card, in order to. So it's not just a matter of having it.
And MasterCard goes the same way. And I would
Right.
assume, pretty much all credit cards do, but please, get the policy that fits your needs.
Right.
And you include your destination. The duration of your travel, destination specific coverage, like for Colombia. It's mandatory for us to enter the country. We have to have it. And any activities that you plan on engaging in. If you're parasailing or hiking up through the Andes, if you get hurt, like you're gonna need to be able to have that stuff covered in case.
Also baggage, right? If your baggage is lost,
stolen, any of that,
or whatever the situation is, you might have valuables in there, and you need to make sure that you follow the directions if you choose to have that coverage,
right,
of how to document the stuff that's in there.
Yeah,
right?
My daughter's boyfriend just gave us a really horrific story about one of the airlines. He flew, not a major airline. And, his stuff was stolen and he was going to a wedding and he had a suit and all that kind of stuff. And, that's pretty rough.
And it was hundreds
of dollars. Yeah. So, but I also wanted to talk about the myths around this because today I've put 3 of them on here. And the first one that is a really common misconception is that travel insurance is too expensive.
Yeah.
Paid $160 for ours.
For both of us.
It's
an added expense. Don't get it twisted. It's more expensive than the ticket price.
Yeah.
But peace of mind is something that's always difficult. We always struggle with attaching monetary to it. And, insurance in the U.S. for health, $500-$700 a month.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at what it would cost in the event if something happened.
Right.
And then, travel insurance. So, I don't know what we spent on our tickets, but we'll just call it like $2,000. I don't know what it was. $1,600. So 10% of that, and 10% of it went to, in addition, was what our insurance plan was.
They say between 4, or the U.S. Travel Insurance Association, they say that between 4 and 8% is what actually goes towards your total trip cost. That's it.
Yeah. And even with ours, we have 3 flights each way, right? 4 flights each way?
3
flights each way. So 6 flights. We miss one of those. We're over $200
in the hole.
At least, if not each, potentially each to reschedule
more, because we're also probably losing our Airbnb, like one day of our Airbnb stay.
So 160 was a no-brainer. 240 would have been a no-brainer. Getting a 250, I would have been like, okay, we might be able to shop this a little bit.
Well, if your total trip costs $2,000, for instance, you're going to spend between $80 and $160. Ours was $160, and that's out of the country, $160, right?
Yep.
So this is probably within $2,000. Well, that's probably a single person, maybe, but even still, it's totally worth it, in my opinion. Especially after having gone through,
you got trip cancellations, which are things out of your control, or you have to cancel because something came up.
Yeah, illness abroad.
Even if, let's say, you plan on being gone for 10 days, and then there's a family matter that happens at home, and you have to leave early, you got to pay for that ticket. And if your original ticket was $1,600, we'll just cut it in half and say that's out of pocket $800.
Yeah,
right.
Lots of different situations. Damaged luggage. That's a big one. I hear about that quite a bit, damaged luggage.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the first one. So that's debunking that it's really not 4 to 8% of your total trip cost. It's really not that big of a deal. I don't think.
I don't think so either. It's not domestically. When I fly Delta, my confidence level is so much higher. There's oftentimes I don't do it. Internationally, multiple stops. It was a no-brainer for me.
Right. But what happened to us was domestic last year.
And it was honestly maybe the second incident I'd have ever had.
Right. And this is not saying that it's
Out of
going
the
to happen. Yeah.
dozens of times that I've flown.
Yeah. But especially if you are a digital nomad traveling around the country or traveling around the world, if you are going to be living somewhere part-time, even if you're living somewhere full-time and you're flying back to the States, several times throughout the year to see family, whatever it is, like it's really going to be in your best interest to get some travel insurance. And so the second myth that comes to the second one, that maybe we think that it doesn't cover that much.
And for some don't.
And some policies don't.
If
But
you
this
buy
is where
a $60 basic one, it may not cover
Yeah.
much. That's where I go back to the third party. You get to quite literally build the coverages that are important to you.
That's awesome, because that policy really does need to fit your personal needs, with the potential reimbursement, could be potential reimbursement of 100% for the events like trip cancellation, delays, interruptions, lost or damaged luggage, medical emergencies, those kinds of things. Like, you really want that to be 100% covered if possible. So choose wisely.
It's another thing. Some of the built-in ones, they are not 100%. They're 50%, 60%, 70%. So, you're not getting the entire recoup back. You're getting some back.
And domestic, like you can use your own insurance. It's going to be out of network, but you still have that coverage as well. And if you're Medicare, then that could be covered as well within the United States. But if you're outside of the US, then you definitely want to have that extra coverage. So, but these can be like really significant financial setbacks if you're not paying close attention to how you want to build that policy, like you said.
Right.
So, number 3, you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so myth number 3 is your regular health insurance covers you when you travel. So a big part of what we're talking about beyond the desk is becoming an expat, living in another country. So some of the things we say may not be precise for domestic, right? If you want to just do the San Diego thing. But when you're traveling abroad, the myth is your regular health insurance covers you when you travel. And the fact is, the CDC cautions that even in countries with nationalized healthcare, so we call it universal, but just, it's covered
Colombia
everywhere.
is that.
Non-citizens might not be eligible for coverage.
That would be me.
Right.
You would be covered now that you're a Colombian citizen.
Right. So it's imperative to assess your health coverage. And I'm going to continue to use the word health coverage rather than health insurance, because they are different and they get interchanged. Coverage options, make sure you're checking your coverage options before you travel, because, Bolivia might be different than Colombia, might be different than Spain, might be different than Japan. Right. And it also might be based on how long you're going to be there. You also need to check with your current in US coverages, because there may be the possibility that you have coverage for 3 days, but not 4 days. I don't know.
In other words, do your research, really be diligent about, what your health insurance covers here, which most do not cover outside of the States. And then find out the country, your destination that you're choosing to go to, what they call for. I would have it anyway. But be able to produce those papers, that paperwork, that documentation when you go there, because you have to get a visa. Like, I'm going to need a visa, right? A travel visa for Colombia, and I have to present that documentation for them in order to be able to stay.
Yeah. Third party, going back to the third party where you can build your own.
Yes.
So you may run into situations where you choose emergency health coverage in the event of,
like, catastrophic
versus I fell ill, right? I caught a flu that's local here that my body wasn't prepared for. Those are different things that are covered on the third party, right? Getting hit by a bus versus getting sick. They're different things. And so make sure you're reading through your policy what actually is covered. And they do legally have to say, these are the inclusions. They have to tell you one of the other inclusions or things that are not included.
Right.
So, COVID triggered a lot of that, where that became a different arm of coverage. And more specifically, what happens if I get COVID before I travel, or what happens if I get it while I'm abroad? And COVID is just one of the many things we can catch while being abroad. And so we just have to make sure that the coverage we choose,
Right.
and it's risk and reward. You have to choose what's important to you, and make a decision there. So that's why I really like the third party, because you can build it based off of what's
Right.
important to you.
Yeah. Like, I mean, a lot of countries, you can't drink the water. Mexico, you can't drink the water.
Not all of Mexico.
And not all of Colombia. Like Medellin, you can
Right.
actually drink the water, but the rest of it, you.
Yeah. There's places that are definitely a little bit more modern that the American build of how we're conditioned.
Yeah, but parasites are
able to-
real. I've had that
For
happen to me in Mexico. So
For sure. If you go to Puerto Vallarta, if you go to Cancun, those are places that actually have filtration systems in
Yes.
place. Doesn't mean it's 100% safe for
I
you.
still use. I was drinking bottled water, and I still got sick. So
Right.
it could have been on the fruit. It could have been
Exactly. They talk about washing fruit, washing
Absolutely.
vegetables, ice cubes, and mixed drinks.
ice cubes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but there are places where the water quite literally is not safe.
Yeah.
Not safe for human consumption. Just
So
not potable.
just having that travel insurance and being prepared in case you do get sick there, be it catastrophic or just becoming ill. So those
Nomads.
are we're gonna leave the mist there. Those are just 3. There were probably a lot more, but if you do think that it's too expensive, you really check out the policies and do the investigation around this, because I think it might be a lot cheaper. And with 4 to 8% of it being 4 to 8% of the total trip costs, that's really inexpensive. I mean, that's, $80 is like a meal out, really, a nice dinner out. So
Yeah, I feel like that 4 to 8% is a little low because a lot of people just buy the basic. I think budget for 10%, whatever your ticket price is.
well, that was based off of like a $2,000 total trip. So
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, fair enough. Ours was 160 off 1,600. Ours was 10%.
Okay.
For
Well,
both
even
people.
10%, like I still feel like that's really
For sure
inexpensive.
worth it. I just don't want
Yeah.
anybody to get hung up on 4% and think, oh, it's nothing. And then go and get a policy and find out it's closer to 10%.
Yeah, and they are going to be different. That was just a national average,
Yeah.
based on a $2,000 trip cost for one person.
If I bought it through Delta, we had less coverage for more money. It was $180.
Wow, yeah.
Our coverage did not cover if we miss our flight because for our layovers.
Right. Yeah. And then, like you said, build your own. So we may think that it doesn't cover as much, but it actually can. So you get to build your own. So talking about digital nomads, you just mentioned that. There are a lot of travel insurance companies out there. Talk to a consultant. Like, even if you go online and you can get a quote online or whatever, I still encourage you to actually talk to somebody, and speak to somebody that's English speaking, obviously, if that's your native language. If you can talk to somebody that you're really going to be able to understand, if you're fluent in Spanish or whatever, the language is to where you're going to be living part-time, then great. But we don't know we don't speak fluent Spanish yet. So we want to be able to talk to somebody, and Sura, who we are looking at, that's Sura, they actually have English speaking consultants that can help you. And their website actually also translates into English, and it's very user friendly.
Just to clarify, you're talking more on the health side right now.
They actually do. Nope. So Sura does all kinds of insurance. So it's a travel insurance that also has medical as well. So they have all kinds of stuff. So it's literally whatever meets your needs. So if you're traveling for extended periods of time, get the policy that's going to reflect that, right, and help you out. So just a few, there's Atlas, Allianz Global Assistance, Safety Wing, which I've heard of Safety Wing for a while now, but really check in. Those are just a few. There's a ton of them. Google it and see what pops up for you. But with Sura, they're like Panama. Let me find my little list here. So they're Panama, Belize, Colombia. Anyway, they had it, but it's mostly South American.
That's cool. They specialize.
That they do, yeah. So that was really cool, especially for Colombia, which is where, and I heard about that on a YouTube video, and I was like, huh. And then I heard a consultant talking on there in an interview, and so I have reached out to her. So we're waiting. I would really love to be able to sit down and talk with her And although you have access to public health care, being a Colombian citizen, you still want to purchase private because public health care, you might be on a wait list and may not be able to get in as quickly as you would if you had private. So just so you're aware of that. And that was stated by her. So private insurance is, public health insurance is great. Everybody can have access to it. But you also want to check out private healthcare, which is super inexpensive in Colombia. I think yours, it's an approximate of about $80 for you.
On the private side or on the public
on the private side with your age. And I think that's dental, vision, and medical.
What would have been a year ago? Would it have dropped? I went from 39 to 40.
Yes.
It would have been different.
Probably so.
Oh, I'm in that new tier.
So I'm
in that new tier.
So that's just an approximate. We're going to find out for sure when I talk to her, and I'm really excited. And then we talked about earlier the prescriptions, where even my mom, who is on Medicare, and my stepdad, even with their Medicare insurance, it still cost for one of his medications, because he has a heart condition now, was like $160 something, even with the copay. Medicare. So our elderly here, in my opinion, are not treated very well. They're not taken care of very well. And then down in Colombia, it would not even be near that, So an MRI here is, probably $2,000 or more. And it's nowhere near that to have an MRI in Colombia. You could more than likely, could be anywhere, I don't know, $700-800. Check on that. But
here's a call out for prescriptions for the U.S. So if you have health insurance and you have a copay and you have, prescription amounts you have to pay, there's a company called GoodRx.
Yes, they're great.
The way they function is they, so if you're somebody who gives the medication, you're the pharmacy, right? And the drug costs you $3 and you sell it for $6. The second I tell you that I have insurance, you can no longer change your price and you can't tell me what you paid for it. However, GoodRx has the info previous to that. So if you use them without saying you have insurance, you might be able to get it for $4.
Right? I've used it.
So I have too. So we essentially punish people the way the broken system, but that's for other podcasts, other topics. But the way the system is, it's not set up for success and it's not set up for the consumer. GoodRx is a great alternative. So what you do is you search for your medication that's on your prescription through GoodRx, and they give you the actual price. And then you ask the pharmacist, if this were to be covered by insurance, what would the cost be? Because oftentimes GoodRx will be less expensive.
Yes.
Not always, but sometimes it'll be less expensive.
For me, it was.
For me, it was as well.
So I just paid out of pocket for it.
I had a 90-day prescription that I think with insurance was going to be $90, and it was like $14 with GoodRx. Like substantial difference.
Mine was $7 with GoodRx.
Like substantial.
And the app, it tells you you tell which pharmacy that you're going to. Like it tells you exactly in different pharmacies, Rite Aid, CVS, or whatever it's all going to be different prices, by the way. Right. So while you're here,
you can get even smarter and talk to your doctor and say, okay, what am I getting? And then check it and then say, okay, can you send it to Rite Aid versus...
That is not in other countries. I think GoodRx is only here.
No, that's for here.
But that's just a little tip there.
It's a little pro tip.
So, but in Colombia, just a quick little note, doctors there, they do telehealth and they do office just like here. They also do home visits.
Yeah.
Incredible. So something we definitely don't have here.
Well, if we go back to a previous episode, we talked about setting appointments, and sometimes they don't come through. So they do home visits, but just know that it's a different culture.
And everything's done through WhatsApp there. Emails, things like that. Unless you could make an appointment online, I guess, but do it through WhatsApp. So, but that is all we have for today, Chad, on insurance.
Thank you for busting those myths. I think those were myths I had prior to this trip when it came to investigating, travel insurance mainly on the protection of your travel more so than the health side right? Because I've worked for a company for a decade where my insurance was just covered. It wasn't it was an afterthought. It was nothing I ever thought about, something I've ever had to think about until January this year, working for myself.
Yeah, it'll be 1 year
Right.
anniversary.
So that's something that we've had to think about. So is it too expensive? Not really. When you think about what you get out of it, and especially traveling abroad, I think it's a no-brainer. Just do third party where you can build your own policy to the things that are important to you.
Yeah.
It does have tons of coverage, including cancellations, emergency visits for medical purposes. Again, when you build your own, it's going to cover what you want it to cover.
Yeah, and for you being a Colombian citizen, which is not going to be the case for most people living part-time or full-time in another or part-time in another
Having
country,
that's going to be mandatory.
you can actually get your physicals and everything done in Colombia, which, listen, they have better health, better medical coverage, better hospitals and everything there. So, yeah, Colombia has the top ranked hospitals in all of Latin America. They have like 9 of them.
And when you compare the U.S. health system versus Colombian, they outrank the U.S. as well.
They do.
The U.S. is great, don't get me wrong, but there is a system that's broken that is highly inflated and everything costs more than it should. And there's multiple systems that are broken that contribute to that way of life.
Right.
Colombia is not so convoluted that it's caused that issue, not today. So they're still reaping the benefits of having a great medical side without the exuberant costs that come with it.
And that's another myth around Colombia in general, is that it's still a third world country and, you know, you're going to go down there and have plastic surgery and your face is just going to get mutilated, blah, 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 because the people in Colombia don't know how to.
Right.
Yeah. So that's also a huge, huge myth. So anyway,
that's what we're talking about next week.
So what are we talking about next week? This is exciting for me. We are going to be talking about pet travel. I am finally going to get into some of the nuts and bolts. I'm going to see if I can have a conversation with our vet, because he is in the U.S. If you are going to travel with your pet out of the country, you have to have a certified veterinarian. It can't be just any old vet to be able to stamp that paperwork and say that your dog is authorized to travel to another country and to whatever country that you're going to, and every country has different specifications. So we're going to get into all that next week. And what are the costs around this? Some potential struggles, especially emotionally, because, you know, if your dog's not small enough to travel underneath the seat, it has to go in the cargo, probably in a crate. So how do we go about all that? And how to get your pet from the U.S. to your next destination. So until next time, keep expanding your horizons and living beyond the desk. Have an extraordinary day.